Well, it's simply not true that the United States was ever a leader when it comes to the issue of human rights. A study was done a few years ago by a journalist named James Lucas, who came up with a fairly solid estimate in terms of the number of people around the world that have been killed by wars and conflicts that have been started or engineered or severely aggravated by the United States in terms of its foreign policy and its military interventionism around the world. And the estimate that James Lucas came up with was that since World War II, the United States has directly caused the death of about 20 million people in approximately 37 nations over a period of about 70 years. So the idea that the United States is somehow a champion of human rights or has the impact of spreading peace and things like that on an international level is simply foolish. So it's not the case that the United States was ever the champion of human rights. I mean, the United States is simply a modern world empire, just like the British Empire before it. It's essentially a reworking of the old British Empire, or perhaps the modern version of something like the Roman Empire. So that's very important to consider. Now, in the speech that you're referring to, Jimmy Carter was actually talking about a domestic issue in the United States, which has to do with the fact that under the Trump administration, there's been a policy that's been adopted where the children of illegal immigrant families are separated when illegal immigrants come into the United States. When there's an illegal border crossing, there's currently a policy in place where the children are separated from the parents and subject to detention in separate facilities. And this is certainly a questionable practice in the sense that, first of all, it's generally considered inconsistent with human rights objectives to forcibly separate families. While individuals can have different opinions on immigration policy and immigration enforcement and things of that nature, there's some questions about the way in which this situation is being handled. The fact that children are not being returned to the families in some instances. There's been evidence of that. The conditions under which the adults and the children are being held under in some of the illegal immigrant detention facilities and things of that nature as well. So there is a human rights issue when it comes to this particular question. But Jimmy Carter was actually being very selective, though, when he was talking about how the United States has lost its way in terms of being an upholder of human rights. That's never been the case. The United States has been responsible for countless violations of human rights on an international level. And even within the domestic United States itself, while there's certainly been a lot of protest in recent times over this policy of separating families at the border, it's also been a somewhat selective indignation, if you will, because the Trump administration has certainly implemented this policy, but similar policies have existed under previous presidents. Also, there are many other comparable things that happen in the United States. For example, there have been quite a few cases of children and other innocent bystanders being killed in paramilitary police raids on private homes and things of that nature. So this is hardly the only human rights issue that's going on in the United States at present. And a lot of the domestic American media, domestic American politics is very polarized and very divided right now between Democrats and Republicans and between supporters of Donald Trump and opponents of Donald Trump. And a lot of the American media has been trying, at least the sections of the media that are in opposition to the Trump administration, which is a substantial portion of the television networks and all of that, they've largely been using this issue as a means of attacking the president. So it's something of a selective issue. Now, I think Jimmy Carter is sincere when he claims that this is a human rights issue, and it is. But it's also one that needs to be viewed in this wider context, and it's simply not true that the United States ever was a champion of human rights, and is not today.